Oven is preheated at 275. My beef is out of the fridge and I'm ready to cook it. Okay, so the old coot here coming at you with another exciting video. This is budget prime rib at budget prices, right? So instead of paying, $15 a pound for prime rib, I basically paid somewhere in the neighborhood of like $6.99 a pound for Chuck Loin. Keep in mind this is Chuck Loin, not Chuck Roast. Chuck Loin is a leaner cut of beef, right? You've got your marbling throughout, very little marbling, but at the same time, you're going to get tender, juicy roast, right, at budget prices. So let me explain what's going on here. If you saw the previous video to this one, basically I laid out all of the meat. I seasoned it with kosher salt, right, and some black pepper. Sky's the limit. You could use onion powder, garlic powder, lemon pepper, whatever special spice rub you have. You could use whatever you want. But the important thing is that kosher salt. Make sure you use a liberal amount of kosher salt all around, underside. Make sure you coat all of your beef. What you're basically doing is during the packing process, right, when they actually process the beef, what happens is there's a lot of like cutting and then freezing and then defrosting, right? And then the butcher does their thing. So how many times have you gone to the market, you bought a steak, you threw it right into a frying pan when you got home and you had a watery steak? What this process of putting this in the fridge overnight, at least 24 hours does, is it pulls some of that excess moisture out of the beef so that you still get a juicy cut of beef, right? A juicy slices of beef as you cut into it, but at the same time it's not watery. Also, that salting and peppering ahead of time with the kosher salt and the black pepper, what that does is that puts flavor into the crust, right, of the beef, also the meat itself. The kosher salt is going to help to tenderize and break down some of those tough of tissues that are in there. And at the same time, you're going to get a nice crust. You're going to get that bark, that outer part of the beef that usually is the most flavorful. So that's what that whole process does. So what I did was when I got the beef yesterday from the market, what I do is I put it on a cooling baking rack. As you can see here, this is the cooling baking rack. And then I put that in on top of a half sheet. So whatever sizes you decide to use, here's a smaller one. This is the one that I'm actually going to bake on. I did put links down below in the description. I like Volrath. They seem to be the highest quality at the lowest prices. Also a restaurant industry standard, just FYI. But I did put links to Nordic Ware as well, which is like the budget-friendly version of Volrath, and some other budget-friendlier links down there. So if depending on your budget, how much you want to spend, there you go. But anyways, the important thing is to put this in the fridge for at least 24 hours on some sort of like platform that's up off the bottom so that air can circulate all around this, right? And that's the whole point, is that you're trying to pull out that excess moisture, right? So you don't get a watery cut of beef or a watery steak, but at the same time, you're helping that salt get in there and penetrate and do its thing, right? Embarking flavor, taking out some of the water. You get the idea. So what I'm going to do now is, if you're, in pre-holiday mode, right? Christmas Eve is tomorrow. New Year's is coming up, and you're planning on making this for like a holiday, or if you're watching this in March, let's say, or June, or 4th of July, or whatever, and you just want to get a nice juicy slices of beef at budget-friendly prices. Here's what we're going to do. So I've got my oven preheated to 275. And what we're going to do is we're going to cook this off for a good amount of time. Probably the bigger cuts, like these are 3-pound pieces, will probably take somewhere in the ballpark of like 3 hours. The 2.5-pound pieces will probably take somewhere in the ballpark of around 2.5 hours, 2 hours. And the best way to clock that or measure that is you can periodically take a temperature reading with something like this, like a digital meat thermometer. This happens to be a ThermoPro. I love the company, love their products. But basically the way it works is when you open this up, you get your probe, and then you can probe and go ahead and test it. What I like to do is I like to let it go. I like to let the meat go for at least 2 hours. Let it go for 2 hours just so that it'll cook without being punctured. When you start sticking probes in and out of the beef, what's happening is you're opening up a canal, right? Like a river of juices will come flowing out. That's what makes your final result dry. So the best way to do it, if you can, is to use something like this. This is a ThermoPro Spike. They make, I believe, a 4-probe version, a 2-probe version. But basically, you set it and forget it. You shove this thing in the thickest part of the beef, right? Wherever, that is. Like in this case, it would be here. You want to make sure that when you do put the spike in, right, the actual probe part, that it's centered top and bottom, and it's also centered left to right in the thickest part. So this would be the thinnest part. This would be the thickest part. This is where you want to put it, and you want to put it in this way. So that's how you would do that if you're going to use the spike. And then obviously we have different size cuts of beef, right? This happens to be like a 3 and a something pound. This is more of like a 2.5. This is like a 2 1/4 pound. This is probably like a good 3 pounds. So that's why you definitely want to start with like the biggest piece. If you only had one probe, I would say put it in the biggest cut of beef that you have. And what you're aiming for is, I'll show you the temperatures here in a second. What you're aiming for is, if you want to go well, you cook it to 170. If you want to go medium, you cook it to 160. If you want to go rare, you cook it to 145. In my case, this is why I chose different size cuts when I went to the butcher to get my meat, because different people have different tastes, right? Some people like it more well done. That would be like the smaller piece, right? It's going to cook more because it's a smaller piece for the same amount of time. Whereas like something like this big one here, this will be more on the rare side, right? Some of them I guess like rare. So there you go. So you've got well done, medium, and rare all coming at the same tray at the same time. You're going to pull it out of the oven. Everything should be cooked. I may actually pull one of the smaller ones out quicker, just because I don't want it too well done. Nobody likes shoe leather. They want it so that it looks brown, right? But they, some people like it where it's pink, like black and blue or whatever the story is. Anyways, you get the idea, right? So what I'm going to do is, just for today, because this is the day before Christmas Eve, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cook one of them today and show you all that process. And I'm also going to be making a nice little sauce that goes with this. A combination of parsley, cilantro, some red onion, some garlic, a little bit of lemon juice, and some other spices and seasonings that you have to stay tuned for the next video to catch. So while this is going to cook away, I'll show you how to do the sauce. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull off the smallest one. And like I said, this will probably be done in something like about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. Very important as well as the temperature setting. So I've got it set to 275. I'm on convection bake. If you just have a regular bake in your oven, that's totally fine. What the convection does is it helps to add that crust on the outside. You get more browning, etc. You kind of get the idea. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook at 275. That low temperature helps to break down some of the tougher, right, parts of the beef that are here, right? And it also helps to get rid of the chewiness. Chuck Loin, right? This is Chuck Loin. Chuck Loin, if you don't cook it the right way, it'll come out chewy. What you want is a nice tender slice as you're slicing away. So when you cut it with your fork and knife, it just literally like falls apart. And that's what we're after. And that 275 temperature is just perfect. It's magnifique. Okay, so here we go. So the final prep on our Chuck Loin, right, roast here is I just want to put a little bit of olive oil on the outside, and that also helps with the browning. The best way to do that, hands-free, is with one of these suckers. This is the Evo oil sprayer. Basically, you put your olive oil in here. You could use whatever oil you like. If you're not a fan of olive oil, you could use whatever. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way. We'll show you that in a second. But basically, I'm just going to give it like a nice blast across. And you can actually set the nozzle to shoot with your spray up and down or left and right, whatever you prefer. So you can spray down, you can spray this way. What I'm going to do is just one good spray, maybe one on this side, and I'm done. And that's it. So now this is going to go into the oven. Let me show you that real quick as I get blasted by some heat. My rack is in the middle, right? Middle rack. And we're going to go ahead and pop this sucker in there. Nordic Ware bottom tray. This is nonstick, right? It helps with the cleanup afterwards. You could line this with tinfoil if you like, but I'm going to leave it as is because I do want to make a little bit of a juicier sauce after, and then our other sauce is going to go on top of that. You'll see all that in a second. And then same concept here, cooling rack, right, is very important so that the hot air can get all around there and coat everything, and you get the idea. So this is going to go into the oven. Let's see, trying to be careful here and not burn myself. Okay, so center of the oven, try to center it as best you can, right middle rack. We're going to let this go for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to do a temperature test. So with that being said, close the lid. Okay, so speaking of the temperature test, let's go over what we have here. So this is the ThermoPro digital meat thermometer, right? This is the one that like you open up, basically. You open that real quick. They made it too good. Okay, so here we go. So you open it up, and basically then as you probe and you take your temperature reading, it's pretty much instantaneous of how, you know, the inside is doing. And what I'm doing is in my case, I'm looking for that nice rare steak. So what I'm going to do is, if we go back to our temperature readings on the back, there you go. Beef well is 170, beef medium is 160, beef rare is 145. I may actually pull this out at 145, right? And then basically what I'll do is I'll put it on a wood cutting board and cover it, like tent it with foil, tin foil, right? Any old tin foil will do, and just basically cover it up for, you want to let it rest. Make sure that when you take your beef out of the oven, you let it rest at least half an hour. If you can let it rest for 45 minutes, even better, before you start slicing it. And what that does is that allows the juices that are in there to basically reconstitute themselves and relax within the meat. If you took the roast out of the oven and you start slicing it right away, you're just going to get a river of juice that's going to come out. It looks pretty, right? But what happens is your final result will come out, it'll dry quicker, or it'll get drier quicker. So if you want to retain that moisture, very similar to when I cooked the turkey. If you remember the 15-pound turkey we made for Thanksgiving, same concept. You basically just want to let it rest and then slice it. And then if you need to reheat it, like I like eating my beef, you know, kind of like warm, maybe a little bit hot, but if you want it piping hot, what you can do is after you've sliced it, crank up your oven to 350 and just throw the sliced beef on a tray into the oven for about 5 minutes, and that'll heat it up quick without destroying the tenderness. But no more than 5 minutes, otherwise you're going to go from rare to medium real quick. Okay, if you do the temp spike method, right? I've done this so many times that I kind of know, and I know my oven very well, and that comes with time. Is after a while, after you get to know your oven and the settings and how things cook in there and weights and all that stuff, the less and less, you know, you need to use, you know, other curricular or other tools to kind of get what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're using this as a learning tool, right, and you want to go ahead and put the temp spike in, we talked about this before, but basically remember, you want to try to set your probe in the thickest part of the meat, right? Just so you get a more accurate reading. So top to bottom, left to right, try to find the thickest part of the beef or the meat or whatever it is that you're cooking. And then also make sure that you center your probe. I would put it in this way, right? Left to right and top to bottom, make sure it's right in the center. And then basically this connects to the bottom part, right? The booster base part connects to your phone. And then basically it'll give you a literally second by second readout of what's going on inside of that beef. It'll give you the external temperature in the oven itself and the environment. And then also it'll tell you what's going on inside. Anyways, this video is getting way too long. I'm going to throw these back into the fridge. That's another good question that comes up is, do you need to take your beef out like a half an hour before you put it in the oven? Not necessarily, because we're cooking it at such a low temperature, 275, for 2 hours. You really don't need to take your beef out like a half an hour before or anything. Does it help? Sure, but we're talking about like micro increments of like, okay, it's that much better. You know, if you're doing like a cooking competition or something and you're at that level of expertise, you know, sky's the limit, go for it. But for your average cook, I think if you took your beef out, you know, just have it out maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 5 minutes before, you know, while you're preheating your oven, that's fine. So take your meat out first, then turn your oven on. You know, that's all good. That's all fine and dandy. Anyways, I will put links down below to both of these, right? Both of these temperature probes and all that good stuff, the probe and also the digital meat thermometer. I will put links to the rack and the tray as well down in the description section. So make sure to check that out. And with that being said, I think we pretty much covered everything. If you have any comments, post them down in the comment section. Stay tuned for the next video after this one, I'm going to show you all how I make a chutney, a relish, a sauce, whatever you want to call it. I don't know the technical terminology. I just cook it and eat it because that's what I do. I need to put that on a shirt. I cook it, I eat it, and that's what I do. That's going to be in the next video, so stay tuned. It's going to be a beautiful sauce. There's going to be some parsley, some cilantro, some garlic, some red onion, some lemon juice, and some other good stuff in there. Anyway, stay tuned. I'll catch you all in the next exciting video. Make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down there as well.